It was a humid autumn morning in Ravenbrook, a forgotten town nestled between dense woods and abandoned fields deep in the rural south. A thick blanket of fog hugged the ground like a slow-moving ghost, and the air smelled of damp soil, rotting leaves, and something unspoken. Few dared to walk through Hollowmere Park this early, except for a man and his quiet, watchful sentinel. Draven Blackvale, a seasoned rural patrol officer, moved with steady, deliberate steps beneath the shifting trees. At his side, Nyx, a large German shepherd with piercing eyes and a tense posture, sniffed the air like something was terribly wrong. Her instincts had never failed him, not once in 5 long years together. And today, something in her body language was off. Nyx suddenly froze. Her ears snapped upright. Then came the bark. Sharp, urgent. Unlike anything Draven had heard from her before, it was a sound filled with panic. A cry not just of alarm but of despair. Draven narrowed his eyes. "What is it, girl?" Nyx barked again, louder, and tugged at the leash. Without another word, Draven followed, boots crunching over wet earth as they crashed through undergrowth and fallen branches. She led him east, deeper into the restricted area of the park, an overgrown space long forgotten by the town. What they found in the clearing stopped Draven cold. In the center of the field stood a massive white horse, trembling violently, its body partially collapsed under the crushing weight of an enormous tractor tire wrapped tightly around its midsection. The rubber cut into the animal's ribs, pressing down like a noose. The horse's sides heaved in labored breaths, and its wild, pain-filled eyes searched for help that hadn't come, until now. Draven felt something inside him twist. Nyx circled the horse with her tail tucked and ears low, whining softly, as if she blamed herself for not finding it sooner. Draven dropped to his knees and grabbed his radio. "This is Unit 9. I need immediate assistance, veterinary and mechanical rescue. We've got a white horse trapped under a large tractor tire. Breathing is shallow. It's critical. We're at Hollowmere Clearing. Hurry." He ended the call and moved closer. The horse didn't flinch. It looked exhausted, resigned. But then its eyes met Nyx's. For a heartbeat, the pain seemed to pause. The animal let out a low, rasping exhale, and Nyx, as if drawn by something deeper, pressed her muzzle gently against its flank. The moment was heartbreakingly still. 10 minutes later, the faint rumble of tires on gravel signaled backup. A rescue truck rolled into the clearing, and a woman in a red jumpsuit jumped out, her hands already gloved. Ezra Bloodwin, a leading animal rescue specialist, had seen a lot in her career, but never this. "What the hell happened here?" "I was hoping you could tell me," Draven said, still crouched by the horse. "If it weren't for her," he nodded at Nyx, "this horse would have died alone." Ezra took one look and sprang into action. Her eyes scanned the situation like a machine. Bruised hide, sunken flanks, old cuts from failed escape attempts. The tire had likely been there for days. "We'll need to cut it loose. It's pressing against the lungs. One wrong move and we could lose him." She signaled the rescue team. A firefighter fired up a rotary saw, sparks crackling as the blade met rubber. While they worked, Draven's gaze was drawn to something hanging loosely around the horse's neck. An old leather strap with a metal pendant. Worn, weathered, and unmistakable. He reached for it. Etched into the surface was a crest. A simple design, a twisted ash branch over crossed horseshoes. Draven's stomach dropped. That mark belonged to Ashthorn Hollow, a ranch that burned to the ground 15 years ago. He hadn't seen that symbol since the night his mother pulled him from bed, screaming, as flames engulfed the family barn. He clenched his jaw. This couldn't be. The saw buzzed louder now, grinding through the final layer of rubber. Ezra gave a short, sharp command, and the tire fell away with a heavy thud. The horse collapsed onto its side with a wheezing grunt. Not dead, but right on the edge. Ezra rushed in with a syringe, injecting a tranquilizer while motioning for 4 fluids. "He's stable, for now," she muttered. "But barely." Then her brow furrowed. "Wait, look at this." She pointed to the horse's back leg. Branded into the flesh was the same ash branch crest. Faint but still visible. Draven's breath caught. His mother had told him that every horse from Ashthorn Hollow was branded that way, that every one of them had died in the fire. Everyone except. He shook his head, unwilling to finish the thought. Ezra held up the pendant. You recognize this, don't you? Draven swallowed hard. Yeah, it belonged to my father. Ezra blinked. I thought your dad disappeared the night the ranch burned. Draven's voice was hollow. The woods around them fell eerily silent. Not even birds dared break the moment. Nyx stepped forward, ears tilted back, and rested her head gently on Draven's leg. He placed his hand on her fur, eyes fixed on the white horse lying half-conscious in the grass. A horse that shouldn't exist. And somewhere, hidden among the trees at the edge of the clearing, someone was watching. The air felt heavier as the rescue crew loaded the weakened horse onto a specialized trailer. Draven stood beside Ezra, arms crossed, his gaze locked on the old pendant that now rested in her gloved hand. He hadn't seen that symbol since he was a boy, since the night his world had changed forever. A night filled with smoke, screaming, and the roaring fire that devoured everything they had. The memories clawed at the edges of his mind, trying to pull him back. He could almost smell the burning wood again. Nyx remained close to the trailer, refusing to leave the horse's side. The way she had acted, finding him, staying alert, never once backing away, told Draven this wasn't random. She had felt something. Somehow she had known. Ezra watched Nyx too, her expression unreadable. You said she's never acted like that before? She asked softly. Draven nodded. Not like that. It was different. Almost like she was remembering something. As the truck doors shut and the trailer began to pull away, Ezra turned to him. You said this pendant belonged to your father. Was he part of Ashthorn Hollow? Draven hesitated, then slowly replied. He helped run it with my mother. He handled the horses. He loved them, especially the white one. Said it was the most intelligent animal he'd ever worked with. His voice faltered. After the fire, he was just gone. No body, no message, nothing. My mom always said he ran off. I never believed her. They followed the truck back to Hollowmere Animal Hospital, a quiet facility hidden beyond the outskirts of town. Ezra arranged for full monitoring and blood work on the horse, while Draven waited in silence in the observation room. His mind raced. How had that horse survived the fire? How had it ended up in that clearing, alone, trapped, wearing a pendant that should have burned with everything else? As the sedation wore off, the horse stirred. Draven stepped closer to the glass, watching the creature's chest rise and fall in shallow rhythm. His fur was still matted with dirt and dried blood, but something about the animal's presence was calming, familiar. Ezra entered quietly behind him. We scanned for a microchip, she said. Nothing came up, but we did find something else, old scar tissue, near the neck. The kind you'd see from restraints. Heavy ones. Draven's jaw clenched. You think someone was keeping him chained? Ezra didn't answer right away. She looked at Nyx, then back at the horse. I think someone didn't want him found. Draven stared into the stall. The truth he thought had died years ago was clawing its way back. One thing was now certain. The fire at Ashthorn Hollow hadn't taken everything, and someone out there knew. The following morning, a cold drizzle coated Ravenbrook in a dull gray sheen. Draven sat alone in his kitchen, a steaming mug of black coffee cradled in his hands. He hadn't slept. His mind kept replaying that moment in the clearing. Nyx's desperate bark, the hollow look in the horse's eyes, and that damn pendant. Every part of it felt personal, like the past had finally crawled out from the ashes to confront him. And yet, he still didn't understand why. Why now? Why that horse? Across town at Hollowmere Animal Hospital, Ezra stood beside the stall, reviewing lab results that only deepened the mystery. Blood tests showed signs of long-term stress, malnutrition, and old sedative traces, drugs used to keep animals docile over long periods. This wasn't just a lost horse. It had been held, controlled, possibly hidden for years. She brushed a hand down the creature's neck. He flinched, even sedated, then relaxed at her touch. "What did they do to you?" she whispered. Back at the station, Draven sifted through old case files locked in the archives. Reports from 15 years ago, buried under layers of bureaucracy and indifference. The fire at Ashthorn Hollow had been ruled accidental. Faulty wiring. No suspects. No foul play. But now, looking at the faded photographs of the blaze and the list of missing livestock, something didn't sit right. Silver, the prize stallion, had been listed among the dead. Burned beyond recognition. And yet, he was lying in a hospital stall right now, breathing. As the rain thickened, Draven drove out to the edge of town, to the place where Ashthorn Hollow once stood. The land was overgrown now, the remains of the barn reduced to moss-covered stones and rusted metal. He stepped out of his truck and stood silently for a long moment, Nyx at his side. The earth still smelled of soot. He remembered the fire's glow, the screaming, his mother dragging him away as the night consumed everything behind them. And he remembered his father's voice. "Stay with your mother. I'll come back." He never did. A sudden rustle behind him snapped him out of the memory. Nyx growled low. Draven turned sharply, hand instinctively on his holster. But there was no one there. Just trees. But someone had been watching them in the clearing. He was sure of it. He scanned the perimeter. Nothing but silence and rain. As he climbed back into the truck, a chill settled deep in his spine. The past wasn't just calling, it was circling. And someone somewhere was waiting for him to get too close. That night, the hospital's security cameras caught something strange. Ezra sat alone in the observation room, eyes narrowed at the grainy black and white footage. At 2:13 a.m., the horse, Silver, lifted his head abruptly, ears pricked, body rigid. For nearly a full minute, he stared toward the far end of the stall. Nothing was visible. No noise, no movement. Just stillness. But Silver saw something, or sensed it. Ezra rewound the footage again and again. The fear in the animal's posture was undeniable. Meanwhile, Draven met with Cale Dreadthorn, Ravenbrook's sheriff, a man whose expression always seemed carved from stone. Draven laid out the basics, reappearance of a horse believed dead, the pendant linked to his missing father, and the possibility that the Ashthorn fire hadn't been an accident. Cale barely blinked. "You're chasing ghosts," he said, voice low. "That fire was closed years ago. No leads. No suspects. You dig this up again, and all you'll get is trouble." But Draven wasn't backing down. "There's more to this than fire," he replied. "That horse was sedated and restrained. Someone kept him alive, hidden, for a reason." Cale stared at him for a long moment, then stood. "Leave the past alone, Blackvale. Some ashes are better left cold." The warning wasn't subtle. Draven left the office with his jaw clenched and thoughts burning hotter than ever. He wasn't chasing ghosts. He was chasing truth. Later that day, Ezra contacted Bastion Cromore, her former mentor, and one of the few genetic experts in the region familiar with bloodlines from Ashthorn Hollow. She sent over a blood sample and the photos of the brand and pendant. His response was almost immediate and urgent. That horse's bloodline was rumored to be genetically enhanced. Selective breeding, old school, off-the-books work. If that stallion's still alive, someone had a reason to keep him that way. Draven visited his mother, Celine Wraithburn, at her cottage on the edge of Ravenbrook. The woman had aged beyond her years, worn down by secrets and silence. When he showed her the pendant, her hands trembled. She refused to speak for a moment. Then, her voice cracked. "Your father didn't run. He was taken. He found out something about the ranch. About the horses. He tried to expose it." She looked at her son, eyes glassy. "They came for him, and I knew one day they'd come for you too." That night, as Draven lay awake, Nyx restless at his side, thunder rolled through the hills. And in the shadows beyond his window, something moved. Watching. The next morning brought no peace. Draven woke to Nyx barking violently at the front door, hackles raised, teeth bared. He grabbed his sidearm and approached cautiously, but when he swung the door open, there was no one there. Only a manila envelope resting on the porch, sealed with red wax. Inside, A single photograph. A much younger Draven, standing beside his father, and in the background, unmistakably, the white stallion, Silver, scribbled across the bottom in jagged black ink. He was never yours to lose. Draven stared at the photo for a long time. It wasn't just proof Silver had survived. It was proof someone had been watching him for years. He rushed to Ezra's clinic with the photo, his voice low and tense. She studied it carefully. That handwriting. It's familiar, she whispered. I've seen it before on an old intake form from years ago. The man who brought in injured livestock under false names. He called himself Yarrick Vexhart. The name struck Draven like a punch to the gut. Yarrick had worked the night of the fire. His father's right-hand man, a quiet, brooding presence on the ranch. After the fire, he vanished completely. No records, no sightings. Until now. Ezra pulled out her old files, and there it was. A blurred signature on a 2010 form for a wounded mare. It matched. He's alive, she murmured. And he's been in Ravenbrook, hiding in plain sight. As night fell, Draven and Ezra drove to the outskirts of town, guided by GPS coordinates scribbled on the back of the photo. The trail led to a dilapidated farmhouse tucked deep into the woods. Burnt walls, shattered windows, and overgrown fences barely visible in the moonlight. Nix jumped out of the truck before it stopped moving. Ears perked, nose low to the ground. Something was there, watching, waiting. Inside, the house reeked of mildew and dust. Yellowed newspaper clippings covered the walls, articles about Ashthorn Hollow, genetic experiments in horses, missing persons. And in the center of the room, a faded portrait of Silver, painted by hand. On a nearby table, Draven found another pendant, identical to his father's, alongside a pocket knife with the initials R.B. Robert Blackvale. His father. Suddenly, footsteps creaked above them. Someone was on the second floor. Nix growled and Draven raised his weapon. He exchanged a look with Ezra, heart pounding. For the first time in 15 years, the silence of that night was breaking. And upstairs, in the dark, the man who disappeared with their past might finally be ready to speak. Draven took the stairs slowly, each creaking step echoing through the hollow house. Nix was ahead of him, her body low, tail straight, growling deep in her throat. Ezra stayed close behind, flashlight in hand, sweeping the beam across peeling wallpaper and cracked floorboards. At the top of the stairs, the hallway split into two. The door at the end on the left was slightly ajar, and faint breathing could be heard from within. Someone was in there. Alive. Draven raised his voice. Yarrick Vexhart. We know you're here. Silence. Then a cough, raspy, deliberate. Draven stepped forward and pushed the door open. Inside, the room was lit only by a single oil lantern. In the corner, slouched in a rocking chair, sat an older man with sunken eyes and a twisted leg. His face was weathered, but unmistakable. Yarrick. He didn't flinch at the sight of Draven's weapon. Instead, he let out a hollow laugh. I was wondering when you'd come, Yarrick said. You're just like your father, always chasing ghosts. Draven kept his weapon steady. Where is he? Yarrick blinked slowly, then gestured to the pendant around his neck. Gone, like everything else. You think you want answers, but some truths are heavier than they look. Ezra stepped forward. Why keep Silver alive? What was the point? Yarrick looked at her for a long moment. Because he wasn't just a horse. He was proof. He explained everything. Ashthorn Hollow wasn't just a ranch. It was a covert breeding facility. Wealthy investors had funded genetic experiments to create a superior bloodline. Horses stronger, smarter, with enhanced memory and even rudimentary problem-solving skills. Silver was the first successful result. But Draven's father, Robert, had found out the animals were being mistreated, overbred, pushed beyond ethical limits. He planned to expose them. The fire was no accident, it was a cover-up. Robert died in that fire, or so everyone believed. But he didn't, Yarrick finally admitted. He escaped the flames. Wounded. I helped him disappear. Draven's grip on the weapon loosened. Where is he now? Yarrick stared at the lantern, eyes distant. He left Ravenbrook years ago, changed his name, told me to protect Silver, to keep him hidden, even if it meant living like a ghost. His voice cracked. I failed him. I failed you. Draven lowered the gun. For the first time in years, he wasn't staring into the unknown, he was inside it. Nyx moved closer to Yarrick, ears perked, sensing the storm of emotion in the room. But before anyone could speak again, a noise came from outside. A sharp crack of footsteps on broken glass. Ezra looked at Draven. We're not alone. Draven spun toward the sound, instincts kicking in as Nyx let out a low, guttural growl. From the cracked bedroom window, he saw movement along the tree line. Fast, deliberate. A shadow slipped between the trunks, tall and agile. This wasn't a drifter or a curious local. Someone had followed them here. Ezra flicked off the lantern, and the room plunged into near darkness. They know we found Yarrick, she whispered. This wasn't random. Outside, footsteps crunched through wet leaves. Draven moved silently down the stairs, Nyx at his side, ears sharp and eyes locked forward. He signaled Ezra and Yarrick to stay hidden. The wind picked up, whistling through the broken boards of the abandoned house, masking small sounds, making it harder to tell how close the intruder really was. Then came the unmistakable click of a firearm being cocked, somewhere outside the front door. Draven ducked behind a beam, gun raised. A figure stepped onto the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark raincoat with the hood pulled low. In his gloved hand, a pistol. Draven recognized him instantly. Zarek Ironfell, one of the private investors behind Ashthorn Hollow. He hadn't aged well, his face worn, bitter, like a man who'd spent years in hiding. You should have stayed quiet, Blackvale, he said calmly. This doesn't concern you anymore. Like hell it doesn't, Draven replied. You burned that ranch to the ground, killed my father, and now you're back to finish the job. Zarek smiled coldly. Your father was weak. He got sentimental, tried to expose something that was never meant to be public. He took a step forward. And now you found the last piece. Silver. That horse is property, and I've come to reclaim it. Before Zarek could aim, Nyx lunged, her body a blur of muscle and fury. She clamped onto his arm, knocking the gun loose. Draven rushed forward, kicking the weapon away and slamming Zarek into the porch railing. The old wood cracked under the weight but held. Zarek shouted, struggling under Nyx's grip. You have no idea what you're doing, he snarled. I know enough, Draven snapped. Enough to bury what's left of Ashthorn Hollow and everyone who covered it up. He looked toward the woods, where more shadows shifted. Zarek wasn't alone. Reinforcements. This was a cleanup operation. They weren't supposed to survive this night. He grabbed Nyx's collar and backed toward the house. We need to go now. Upstairs, Ezra and Yarrick were already gathering files and evidence. Whatever truth had been uncovered, it had drawn dangerous attention. And as they fled through the back door, headlights flared in the distance. Vehicles coming fast. Ravenbrook's secrets weren't buried yet, but someone intended to make sure they would be. The tires screeched as Draven's truck tore through the backwoods, headlights off, the only light coming from slivers of moon filtering through the trees. Ezra sat in the passenger seat, clutching a file full of documents they had grabbed from Jarrick's hideout, papers, photographs, breeding records, and handwritten letters from Robert Blackvale. Nyx was in the back, panting but alert, her fur still damp from the struggle. In the rearview mirror, 2 sets of headlights danced between trees. They were being hunted. Where do we go? Ezra asked, trying to steady her voice. Nowhere in town is safe. Draven's jaw was tight. We're not going to town. We're going to the only person who might be able to expose this fast enough to stop them. He took a hard left onto a gravel path, branches scraping the side of the truck. Lysandra Crowblade, the journalist. She's been digging into Hollowmere stories for years. She won't be surprised. At a safe house deep in the outskirts, Lysandra waited, having already been contacted through coded channels. Her eyes widened as she saw the file, flipping through pages with practiced urgency. "This is huge," she whispered. "I always knew something was wrong with the fire story. These documents could prove corporate animal experimentation, arson, and conspiracy." Draven nodded. "But if they find out you have this, they'll come for you too." Outside, Nyx growled low. A faint thud echoed in the trees, distant but unmistakable. Lysandra didn't flinch. "Let them try." She pulled a duffel bag from under the table, full of burner phones, USB drives, and 2 laptops. "I've been preparing for this since the day the last Ashthorn foal died mysteriously at auction." She turned to Ezra. "We need to upload everything to multiple servers. If anything happens to us, the story still gets out." Back at the hospital, Silver stirred restlessly in his stall, sensing the unrest in the world outside. A nurse on the night shift swore she saw him pacing, eyes trained on the window like he was waiting for something or someone. And somewhere in the hills above the facility, a black SUV idled with its lights off. Inside, Cale Dreadthorn watched through binoculars, face like stone. He whispered into a radio, "They have the files. Prepare to intercept." As Draven and the others worked to transmit the evidence, a noise cut through the silence. Shattered glass. A flashbang exploded through the side window, blinding white. Nyx barked wildly. Someone was inside. Draven grabbed Ezra and dove to the ground as armed figures in black flooded the room. The truth was seconds from being lost. Unless they fought back. Chaos exploded inside the safe house. Smoke filled the air, and the sharp crack of gunfire echoed off the wooden walls. Draven shielded Ezra with his body as Nyx lunged into the fog, her silhouette vanishing in the flash. The assailants, silent, masked, precise, moved like shadows. These weren't just mercenaries. They were cleaners sent not to scare, but to erase. Ezra reached for the laptop, trying to complete the upload as bullets splintered the table beside her. Lysandra, bleeding from a gash to her forehead, shoved a USB drive into Draven's palm. "If we don't finish this, someone has to." Draven locked eyes with her, nodded, and turned to find Nyx, just as a dark figure raised a weapon behind the journalist. The gun went off, but not before Nyx collided with the attacker midair, dragging him down with a growl that sounded almost human in its rage. Blood splattered the floor. Nyx whimpered, but stood. Ezra screamed, "The signal's weak. The upload's too slow." Draven kicked open the back door and motioned for everyone. "We can't hold this place. We get to the hospital. If they take Silver, it's over." As they fled through the woods, the last lines of code on Lysandra's laptop pushed through. Upload 92%, 93%. Then the screen went dark. The signal was lost. Power cut. The backup generator likely sabotaged. They reached the Hollowmere Animal Hospital by dawn. Staff had evacuated after a mysterious phone call. Cale Dreadthorn's doing. Draven knew it. The parking lot was empty. But inside, in stall 7, Silver stood waiting, calm, still, eyes locked on Draven as if he knew what was coming. Ezra rushed to check his vitals. "He's stressed but stable. We still have time." Draven handed her the USB. "We finish what we started." But the sound of tires rolling up outside shattered the calm. 3 black SUVs surrounded the building. Cale stepped out of the lead vehicle, adjusting his coat, eyes cold as ice. He was done hiding. "Give me the horse," he called out, "and I'll let you all walk away." Draven stepped outside alone. "You'll have to kill me first." Behind him, Nyx stood growling, fur raised. "Ready." Cale smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Suddenly, behind him, Lysandra's voice echoed from the building's speakers. She had found a way to reconnect the signal. The audio blared recordings of investor meetings, genetic test results, and testimonies from Ashthorn workers, all broadcast live on multiple news streams. The truth was no longer a secret. Cale's smile faltered. Draven raised his badge slowly. "It's over. Stand down." For a moment, time stood still. Cale Dreadthorn's face, once unreadable, now twisted into fury as the truth blared from the hospital's speakers. Outside, his men hesitated. The orders had changed. The plan was falling apart. They weren't erasing a loose end anymore. They were standing in the middle of a scandal exploding in real time. One by one, the mercenaries lowered their weapons. Some stepped back. Even shadows know when the light is too strong. Inside the hospital, Ezra held tightly to Silver's reins, whispering calm words as the horse shifted nervously. Lysandra, bruised and bloodied, monitored the live feeds from her laptop. The videos had gone viral. News stations were picking them up. Social media was ablaze. The names of the investors behind Ashthorn Hollow were trending, alongside one simple phrase: he was never just a horse. Silver had become a symbol of what was hidden for too long, and what could never be silenced again. Kale, seeing control slip through his fingers, tried one last move, pulling a small pistol from under his coat and aiming it at Draven. But before he could fire, Nyx launched forward, slamming into him with full force. The weapon flew from his hand. Kale hit the ground hard, gasping as Draven placed a boot on his chest, gun trained directly between his eyes. You burned our home. You lied to the world. But this time, there's no fire hot enough to hide you. Sirens finally pierced the morning air. State police, news vans, federal agents. Everything Kale had tried to avoid was now unavoidable. As he was dragged away in cuffs, his eyes locked with Draven's one last time. There was no more power in them, just silence, emptiness, and maybe, somewhere buried deep, regret. Later that evening, under a red sky, Draven walked Silver through the old fields behind his family's cottage, land that once belonged to Ashthorn Hollow. Celine stood on the porch, tears in her eyes as she watched her son and the horse return to the very place where the story began. No longer ghosts, no longer lost, just survivors. Ezra knelt beside Nyx, gently stroking the fur behind her ears. You saved all of us, she whispered. Nyx looked toward Silver, tail wagging slightly, eyes still sharp but now at peace. A sentinel no longer in battle, but in memory. And as the wind stirred the grass and fireflies rose with the dusk, Draven looked out at the land once scorched by betrayal and now reborn by truth. For the first time in years, he whispered something he never thought he'd say again. We're finally home.